I never imagined that my own son would shove me so violently at the Christmas dinner table that I would fall to the floor in front of the entire family just so his father-in-law could take my seat. What he didn't know was that that very night I would change his life forever, and when he woke up the next day, 47 missed calls would be waiting for him. Because sometimes the consequences arrive when you least expect them. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel. Activate the notification bell because we have new stories every day. Leave a like and tell us in the comments what city you're watching us from. My name is Robert Miller. I'm 68 years old, and throughout my entire life, I built a business empire from scratch. I lost my beloved wife, Susan, 5 years ago, and since then, my son, David, became the most important thing in my world. Well, that's what I believed until the night of December 24th, 2024. That afternoon, I arrived at David's house with a heart full of excitement. I had bought special gifts for my grandchildren, Jacob and Emily, and I was carrying a bottle of wine that cost $1,400 that I had been saving for a special occasion. The house was decorated with golden lights, and the aroma of roasted lamb filled the air. Everything seemed perfect for a family night. "Grandpa Robert!" the children shouted, running towards me. Jacob, at 15, was already taller than me, while Emily, 12, still hung from my neck like when she was little. Their sincere hugs were the only moment of genuine happiness I would experience that night. Teresa, my daughter-in-law, greeted me with a forced smile. There was always something in her eyes that made me uneasy, as if she were measuring every word I said. "Hello, Robert. Good thing you arrived early." David appeared from the kitchen, but his greeting was distant, almost mechanical. "Hi, Dad. Leave your coat there." I noticed I had something strange in the atmosphere. There was a tension I couldn't quite identify. The table was set for 8 people, but there were only 6 of us: David, Teresa, the children, and me. "Are we waiting for someone else? Is someone else coming?" I asked, observing the additional place setting at the table. "Yes, my father will be here in a moment," Teresa replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was referring to Arthur Johnson, a 72-year-old businessman who had always silently competed with me in the world of real estate. When Arthur arrived, everything changed. David completely transformed, becoming attentive and solicitous in a way I had never seen him be with me. "Mr. Johnson, it's a pleasure to have you here. Come in, please, come in." I found it strange, but decided not to dwell on it. After all, it was Christmas Eve, and I wanted to enjoy it with my family. We sat down at the table, and I took my usual seat, the one that had always been mine during family celebrations, at the head next to David. I had occupied that place for years, ever since Susan died and family dinners moved to my son's house. But when Arthur approached, David looked at me with an expression I will never forget. Cold, calculating, ruthless. "Dad, I need you to get up from there." "Excuse me?" I asked, confused. "Why?" "That seat is for Mr. Johnson. He's the guest of honor." I felt as if I had been slapped. "David, son, I've always sat here. It's my place in this family." The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Teresa was looking down, uncomfortable. The children had stopped talking. Arthur remained standing, watching the scene with a mixture of awkwardness and satisfaction. "Dad, don't make this difficult. Move." "I don't understand, David. What is going on here?" That's when it happened. David approached me, placed his hands on my shoulders, and shoved me with such force that I lost my balance. My 68-year-old body couldn't withstand the push, and I fell heavily to the tiled floor in front of the whole family. The silence that followed was deafening. The children shouted my name. Teresa covered her mouth with her hands. Arthur remained motionless, but in his eyes I saw something that chilled my blood. Satisfaction. From the floor, aching and humiliated, I heard the words that would change everything forever. "This seat is for my father-in-law. Get out." In that moment, as I lay on the cold tile floor, something broke inside me. Not just my dignity, but something much deeper. The image I had of my son, the unconditional love I felt for him, crumbled like a house of cards. The children helped me up, their faces full of confusion and pain. "Are you okay, Grandpa?" whispered Emily with tears in her eyes. "I'm fine, sweetie," I lied, stroking her hair. But inside, a storm had begun to form. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. David had already taken his seat at the table as if nothing had happened. Arthur occupied my chair without saying a word. Teresa served dinner with nervous movements, avoiding my gaze. I sat in a side chair like a second-class guest in what had once been my own family. Throughout the entire dinner, I watched as David addressed Arthur with a respect he had never shown me. I watched as Teresa hung on every word of the man who now occupied my spot. I watched as my grandchildren looked at me with sadness, not understanding why their father had humiliated their grandfather. And as I watched, I made a decision that would change all of our lives forever. The dinner passed in a tense atmosphere that felt thick as smoke. Every bite tasted like betrayal. Every shared laugh between David and Arthur pierced my soul like sharp daggers. My grandchildren tried to fill the silence with innocent comments about their school projects, but even they perceived that something fundamental had changed in our family dynamic. "Jacob got excellent grades this semester," I commented, trying to regain some sense of normalcy amid the emotional chaos bubbling inside me. "Oh, right," David responded, without even turning to look at me, completely focused on cutting the meat he was serving to Arthur. "Mr. Johnson, is the lamb cooked to your liking?" It was as if I had become invisible. For 42 years, I had raised this man. I had taught him values, principles, given him everything I had and more. And now he was treating me like an annoying stranger at his own table. When we finished dinner, I excused myself discreetly. "I'm going to the restroom for a moment." No one responded. They didn't even look up from their brandy snifters and their business conversations, in which I, the man who had built the family company from nothing, was not included. I walked toward the bathroom with slow steps, but my mind was already racing at breakneck speed. Once inside, I locked the door and looked at myself in the mirror. The man looking back at me had reddened eyes, not from tears, but from a cold fury that was beginning to crystallize into pure determination. I pulled out my cell phone and started dialing numbers I knew by heart. The first call was to Edward Rodriguez, my personal attorney for 25 years. His sleepy voice answered on the fourth ring. "Robert, it's Christmas Eve. What's the emergency?" "Edward, I need you to prepare documents first thing tomorrow to revoke all the power of attorney David has in the company. All of them, without exception." There was a long pause. Edward knew the structure of my business perfectly. "Robert, are you sure? That would mean I know exactly what it means. I also want you to cancel every single guarantee I have co-signed for him. The house, the car, the corporate credit cards, everything. What happened? My son just showed me who he really is, and I'm going to show him who I am. The second call was to Carol White, my accountant and financial director. She also knew every monetary move the family made. Carol, I'm sorry to bother you on the holiday. I need you to freeze all joint accounts with David early tomorrow. Also, suspend his executive salary and benefits. Is there a legal problem, Mr. Miller? No, Carol. I'm just taking back control of what belongs to me. The third call was the most important. I dialed the number of Richard Stevens, my second-in-command at the company, a loyal man who had been with me since the beginning. Richard, forgive the hour. Could you go to the office early tomorrow? I need you to remove all of David's personal belongings from his executive office. Are you going to fire him, boss? He's no longer the CEO. You'll take his place starting tomorrow. Prepare a letter of immediate termination, justified cause, loss of confidence. Understood, Mr. Miller? Anything else? Yes. Place a note on his desk that reads, "This office is not for you." I want him to understand the message perfectly. After the calls, I stayed a few more minutes in the bathroom, mentally organizing every move I would make. It wasn't revenge I was seeking. It was justice. For decades, I had built a business empire, sacrificed personal time. I had worked 18-hour days to give my family a comfortable life. And my own son had just demonstrated that all that effort wasn't worth his basic respect. I returned to the dining room with a serene smile that concealed the storm raging inside me. The conversation continued without me, as if I had never existed. The European markets are very volatile, Arthur was commenting, gesticulating with his glass of cognac. Exactly, David agreed enthusiastically. That's why we believe a merger between our companies could be very beneficial. Those words hit me like a bolt of lightning. A merger. They were planning to merge my company, the work of my entire life, with Arthur's without even consulting me. A merger? I asked, my voice controlled. David looked at me as if he had forgotten I was still there. Oh yes, Dad. Mr. Johnson and I have been discussing possibilities for expanding my company. Well, technically, I am the CEO, he replied, with an arrogant smile I had never seen on his face before. Technically, I repeated slowly, savoring each syllable. I see. Arthur intervened with his calculated, measured voice. Robert, you understand that modern business requires fresh approaches. David has innovative ideas. I'm sure he does, I replied, maintaining my external composure while internally noting every word for the future reckoning. The children had gone up to their rooms after dessert, oblivious to the drama unfolding between the adults. Teresa was collecting the dishes with mechanical movements, clearly uncomfortable, but not daring to interfere in the men's conversation. I think it's time for me to leave, I finally announced, rising from the side chair where I had been relegated. Sure, Dad. Have a good rest, David replied, without looking up from his cigar. He didn't even bother to walk me to the door. It was Jacob who ran down the stairs when he heard I was leaving. You're going already, Grandpa? I thought you'd stay later, like always. No, Sport, I have some important things to do tonight. Are you mad about what happened at dinner? My grandson's question pierced my heart. Even a teenager had perceived the injustice of the situation. I'm not mad, Jacob. I'm disappointed. But sometimes disappointments teach us important truths. I don't get it. You will soon, son. I love you very much. Remember that always. I left that house feeling strangely liberated. The cold December air filled my lungs as I walked toward my car. In the driver's seat, before starting the engine, I took out my phone again. I had one last call to make. Ms. Lopez, this is Robert Miller. Pardon me for bothering you on Christmas Eve, but I need to modify my will tomorrow. Yes, it's urgent. Very urgent. As I drove toward my house, a smile appeared on my face for the first time all night. David had played his cards, believing he had control over the situation, but he had forgotten one fundamental detail. I was the one who had built the game board, and tomorrow he would discover the real rules. I arrived home near midnight, but sleep was the last thing on my mind. While the rest of New York City celebrated Christmas, I was preparing for the most important battle of my life. I turned on all the lights in my study and spread out on the oak desk all the legal documents I had accumulated over 4 decades of work. The first task was to meticulously review the corporate agreements. I needed to confirm something I suspected. David had never held any real share ownership in the company. He was CEO by my appointment, not by acquired right. All his authority depended on my will, and that will had just radically changed. As I leafed through folders and files, my phone rang. It was Carol, my accountant. Mr. Miller, I've been reviewing the accounts since we spoke. There's something you need to know urgently. Tell me, Carol. David has been using the company's guarantees for personal expenses much greater than we imagined. The apartment where he lives has a mortgage of $600,000 guaranteed by you. His sports car, $120,000. The corporate credit cards. Mr. Miller, he owes over $200,000 in personal purchases. The information hit me like an anvil. Is he delinquent on any payments? Several. Without your guarantees, he will be foreclosed upon immediately. The banks will begin repossession proceedings tomorrow if there's no collateral. Perfect. Cancel all guarantees at dawn. Are you completely sure? This will ruin his financial situation. Carol, my son just ruined something much more valuable, our relationship. Now he will learn about consequences. After hanging up, I continued reviewing documents until I found what I was looking for. David's employment contracts. My company, Miller & Sons Construction, paid him a salary of $8,000 a month, plus benefits that included a company car, private health insurance, representation expenses, and annual profit sharing. All of that would disappear in a matter of hours. At 3 a.m, I called Richard. Boss, I haven't been able to sleep thinking about what you asked me. Do you really want me to do this? Richard, do you trust my judgment after all these years? Of course, Mr. Miller. You lifted me out of poverty and gave me opportunities I never imagined. Then trust me now. David has crossed a line of no return. Go to the office early, remove his personal belongings, and place that note exactly as I told you. Understood? And if he arrives while I'm doing it, all the better. I want him to see what it feels like when someone takes your place. At 4 a.m, I reviewed the financial statements for the last 5 years. What I discovered filled me with a mixture of anger and disappointment. David had been diverting small amounts to personal accounts for years, nothing illegal, but ethically reprehensible. He had used company contacts to secure private contracts. He had collected commissions for recommending suppliers without informing me. My son had not only disrespected me that night, he had been systematically betraying my trust for years. At 5 a.m, I called my attorney, Edward. Robert, I've been preparing the documents you requested, but I must warn you, This will have immediate legal repercussions. David could sue you for wrongful termination. Edward, I have evidence of fund diversion, misuse of corporate resources, and undeclared conflicts of interest. Do you think he wants to go to court? I understand. The documents will be ready at 8 sharp. Perfect. Also prepare the papers to transfer the ownership of the Park Avenue apartment, which is in David's name. It was a wedding gift, but it's registered as a family loan. I want it back. The apartment where he currently lives? Exactly. Let him learn to pay rent like any normal person. At 6 in the morning, while preparing coffee, I received a WhatsApp message from Emily, my granddaughter. Grandpa, Dad is really stressed. He's been on the phone all night. Is everything okay? I replied, everything will be fine, sweetie. Your grandpa loves you very much. At 7 in the morning, it was time to make the most satisfying call of the entire operation. Chase Bank. This is Robert Miller. I need to immediately cancel all the guarantees I have co-signed in the name of David Miller. Yes, all of them. Mortgage, lines of credit, cards, everything. Mr. Miller, that will mean the payments will be executed immediately against the principal debtor. I am perfectly aware. Proceed. Very well. The cancellation documents will be processed within the hour. Should I inform Mr. Miller? It's not necessary. He will find out soon enough. At 8 in the morning, Edward arrived at my house with all the documents prepared. I signed each paper with an iron determination: cancellation of executive powers, revocation of banking authority, immediate cessation of management functions, recovery of assets ceded as a family loan. Robert, once you sign this, there's no going back. Edward, a few hours ago, my son shoved me to the floor in front of my grandchildren to give my seat to another man. Do you think there's any going back? I signed the last document at 8:30 in the morning. At 9 o'clock, I called Richard to confirm that everything was ready at the office. Boss, I've already removed all his things, his computer, his diplomas, even the plant he had by the window. Everything is in boxes in the warehouse, and the note is placed exactly in the center of his desk, just as you requested. Perfect. When he arrives, let him enter normally. Don't explain anything to him. Let him discover the situation for himself. At 9:30, I received confirmation from Carol. Mr. Miller, all guarantees have been officially cancelled. The banks will begin foreclosure procedures starting at 10 in the morning. At 10 after 10, I put on my best suit. Today wasn't just any day. It was the day David Miller would discover what the word consequences truly meant. I poured myself a last cup of coffee and contemplated the sunrise from my study window. After a sleepless night, I felt strangely energized. There was no trace of the sadness or pain from a few hours earlier, just a crystalline clarity about what needed to be done. My phone was silenced, but I could see the notifications accumulating on the screen. Messages, missed calls, emails. The storm had begun. David was about to wake up to the worst day of his life, and I would be waiting to see his reaction when he finally understood that actions have consequences and that underestimating his father had been the most costly mistake of his existence. David woke up that morning, December 25th, with a strange feeling in his stomach. It wasn't a hangover from the brandy the night before, but something deeper, as if his subconscious had picked up danger signals that his conscious mind hadn't fully processed yet. Teresa was already up, preparing breakfast for the children with mechanical movements. The atmosphere in the house felt tense, charged with an invisible electricity that no one mentioned but everyone perceived. Sleep well? Teresa asked, without looking directly at him, focused on serving orange juice. So, David replied, as he checked his mobile phone. He had 3 missed calls from unknown numbers, probably salespeople taking advantage of the Christmas holiday. What he didn't know was that at that very moment, while he was peacefully eating breakfast, several banks in New York had already initiated guarantee execution protocols. The bank's computer systems had automatically processed the cancellation of guarantees during the early hours of the day. At 10:15 in the morning, David received the first real call. "Mr. Miller, this is Monica Kelly from Bank of America. We urgently need you to contact us regarding your mortgage." "What's going on?" "My mortgage is completely up to date. Sir, the principal guarantee on your loan was cancelled this morning. Without that collateral, the loan automatically enters a situation of immediate exigibility." David felt as if he had been doused with cold water. "What guarantee? What are you talking about?" "The guarantee co-signed by Mr. Robert Miller. Without that guarantee, you must liquidate the full debt or we will proceed with mortgage foreclosure." The call cut off, and David was left with the phone in his hand, trying to process the information. Before he could fully react, the device rang again. "Mr. David Miller, Wells Fargo Risk Department. Your corporate line of credit has been suspended due to cancellation of guarantees. You must report to our offices immediately." He hung up, and the phone rang again immediately. "Citibank, your corporate credit card has been blocked." Another incoming call. "JP Morgan Chase Bank, precautionary seizure procedure on," and another one. "Capital One, immediate execution of in 15 minutes. David received exactly 47 calls from different banking institutions, insurance companies, car dealerships, and corporate suppliers. His financial world was collapsing in real time while he stood in his kitchen, still in his pajamas. Teresa watched the scene with growing horror. "What is happening, David? Why so many calls?" "I don't know," he mumbled, but in the back of his mind, a terrible suspicion began to form. His father's words from the night before resonated in his memory. "Technically, I am the CEO." At 11 in the morning, he decided to go to the company immediately. He needed to understand what was happening, and more importantly, he needed access to corporate resources to manage this unexpected crisis. He drove his BMW 7 Series through the empty, Christmassy streets of New York, unaware that it would be one of the last times he would be behind the wheel of that vehicle. The dealership had already received orders for repossession due to leasing default. He arrived at the Miller & Sons construction building at 11:30. The security guard greeted him normally, showing no signs that anything had changed. David took the elevator up to the 5th floor, where his executive office was located. Upon stepping out of the elevator, he noticed something strange. Richard Stevens was in his office, sitting behind his desk, reviewing documents that clearly belonged to the executive files. "Richard, what are you doing in my office?" Richard looked up with an uncomfortable but firm expression. "Good morning, David." "Well, this is no longer your office." "What do you mean, not my office? What are you talking about?" "Read the note on the desk." David approached and saw, placed exactly in the center of the wooden surface, a handwritten note in his father's unmistakable calligraphy. "This office is not for you." The words hit him like physical punches. It was the very phrase he had used the night before, but now directed against him. He felt his knees weaken. "Richard, this has to be a joke." "It's not a joke, David." Mr. Miller appointed me CEO this morning. You have 5 minutes to collect your personal items from the warehouse and leave the building. This is impossible. I am the CEO. I've been building this company alongside my father for years. Not anymore, David. The termination documents are officially filed. Justified cause, loss of confidence, and conflict of interest. David felt the world spin around him. He pulled out his phone to call his father, but before he could dial, Richard handed him a sealed envelope. Mr. Miller asked me to give you this. With trembling hands, David opened the envelope. Inside was a typed letter on company letterhead. David, the consequences of our actions sometimes arrive when we least expect them. Last night, you showed me that your place in your life no longer exists. Today, I'm showing you that your place in my company doesn't either. You have until 12 noon to vacate any property under my name. The Park Avenue apartment, the car, everything. You will learn to live with your own resources, as you should have years ago. Don't look for me, don't call me, don't try to use intermediaries. This decision is final and irrevocable. Your father, who no longer recognizes you, Robert Miller. David read the letter 3 times before the words fully penetrated his understanding. It wasn't just the job, it was everything. His house, his car, his lifestyle, his financial security, all had disappeared in a single morning. Richard, you have to help me. You've known my father for years. This is a temporary lapse of judgment. David, I saw what you did to him last night. My own wife was outraged when I told her. Mr. Miller is the fairest man I know, but also the most determined. When he makes a decision, there's no turning back. But I'm his son, his only son. You were his son. Last night, you decided to be something else. David left the corporate building like a sleepwalker. In the parking lot, he found a tow truck hooking up his BMW. The driver showed him a court order for repossession due to non-payment. Wait, there must be a mistake. No mistake, sir. The lease is expired, and without collateral, the vehicle is being recovered immediately. David had to walk to the nearest subway station, something he hadn't done in years. During the ride home, his phone wouldn't stop ringing. Banks, creditors, suppliers, all demanding immediate payments. When he finally arrived at his apartment, he found Teresa crying on the sofa with a legal notice in her hands. David, we have 24 hours to leave the house. They're going to foreclose on the mortgage. What? Your father cancelled all the guarantees. We owe $600,000 that we don't have. David collapsed into a chair, completely defeated. In less than 12 hours, he had lost his job, his car, his house, and his financial stability, and worst of all, he had lost his father. The words he had uttered the night before now resonated like a curse. This seat is for my father-in-law. Get out. Now, he was the one who was out of everything. David spent the next 2 hours trying to process the magnitude of the disaster that had unleashed itself upon his life. Teresa alternated between hysterical crying and bitter reproaches while desperately packing the most valuable belongings they could take before the eviction. "This is your fault," she yelled while stuffing jewelry into a suitcase. "How could you be so stupid? Shoving your own father in front of the children." "Teresa, calm down. This can be fixed. I just need to talk to him." "Talk? David, they've taken everything from us. The house, the car, your job. What are we going to tell my parents?" That question hit David like a slap. Arthur Johnson, his father-in-law, had been a first-hand witness to the humiliation he had inflicted on Robert. If there was one thing Arthur valued above all else, it was family respect and patriarchal dignity. David picked up his phone with trembling hands and dialed his father-in-law's number. He needed support. He needed an ally. He needed someone to intercede for him. "Arthur, it's David. I urgently need to talk to you." The voice that answered him was cold as winter ice. "David, I was waiting for your call." "Arthur, something terrible has happened. My father has lost his mind. He's taken everything from me over a minor family disagreement. I need your help." There was a prolonged, blood-chilling silence. "A minor disagreement? David, did you hear what you just said?" "Well, it was just a misunderstanding. You know how these things are between fathers and sons." "No, David, I don't know, because I would never disrespect my father the way you did last night." David felt panic start to seize him. "Arthur, please. Teresa and the children need stability. I know you can understand." "What I understand perfectly is that I witnessed a 42-year-old man publicly humiliate the father who gave him everything. I saw you shove Robert to the floor to give me a seat that I neither asked for nor wanted. I thought you would appreciate the gesture of respect." "Respect, David? Respect is not built by disrespecting others, especially your own father." David could hear the increasing contempt in Arthur's voice. His last resource was vanishing before his eyes. "Arthur, we're family. Teresa is your daughter. The children are your grandchildren." "Exactly. And that's precisely why I cannot allow my grandchildren to grow up thinking that kind of behavior is acceptable. Teresa and the children will always have my support. But you, David, have proven to be someone who cannot be trusted." "What do you mean?" "I mean that any man capable of betraying his own father is capable of betraying anyone. There will be no financial support from me. There will be no job in my companies. There will be no refuge in my house. Furthermore, I have decided to contact Robert to offer him a personal apology for having been an involuntary witness to your deplorable behavior." "You're going to apologize to him?" "Of course. A man of his caliber did not deserve that humiliation, especially in front of his family. And I'm also going to offer him a business partnership proposal." Arthur's words hit David like hammer blows. Not only had he lost his father-in-law's support, but now Arthur was directly allying himself with his father. "Arthur, please reconsider." "I have reconsidered, David, and my conclusion is clear. Robert Miller is the kind of man I want to do business with. You are not." The line went dead, leaving David with the phone lifeless in his hand. Teresa had heard the entire conversation from the doorway. Her face had lost all color. "My father is not going to help us," she whispered. "No. What are we going to do, David? Where are we going to live? The kids have school. I have my job." "I don't know, Teresa. I simply don't know." At that moment, Jacob and Emily came down the stairs, alerted by the raised voices and the chaos of suitcases and boxes all over the house. "What's going on?" Jacob asked, with the worry of a teenager who senses his world is changing. "Why is Mum crying?" Emily added in a small voice. David looked at his children and felt a pang of shame, deeper than anything he had experienced until that moment. How was he going to explain to them that because of his pride and stupidity, all their family stability had disappeared? "Kids, we need to talk," Teresa began, her voice cracking. "Is it because of what happened last night with Grandpa?" Jacob asked directly. The question showed that even the teenagers had grasped the seriousness of the situation better than David himself. "Yes, son, it's because of that." "Daddy, why did you push Grandpa?" Emily asked, with tears in her eyes. "He looked really sad." David couldn't answer. The words caught in his throat. "Grandpa loves us a lot," Emily continued. "He always brings us gifts and tells us stories." "Why were you mean to him?" I thought—" "You thought what, Dad?" Jacob insisted. "Because it looked like you hated him." "I don't hate your grandfather, but you treated him like you did," Jacob retorted with a maturity that broke David's heart. "And now he must hate us too." "No, son. He loves you. He would never hurt you." "Then why can't we stay home? Why is Mom packing everything?" David sank onto the sofa, completely defeated. His own children were judging him, and they were right to do so. "Because Dad made a very big mistake," he finally admitted. "A mistake that is going to change our lives." "Can you say sorry to Grandpa?" Emily asked, with the innocence of a child who still believes adult problems can be fixed with sincere apologies. "It's too late for that, sweetie." Teresa approached and sat next to him for the first time all day. Her voice contained no reproach, only a deep sadness. "David, I need you to understand something. The children and I are going to my parents' house." "What?" "I can't stay with you after this. I can't be with someone capable of humiliating his own father like that." "Teresa, we're a family." "No, David. A family is built on respect and values. You proved last night that you have neither." David looked at his wife, his children, the suitcases, the eviction notices on the table. In less than 24 hours, he had destroyed his entire life for a moment of stupid arrogance. And the worst part was, his father was right. He had brought it all upon himself. The consequences had arrived, and they were far more devastating than he could have ever imagined. The afternoon of December 25th turned into the longest and most painful of David's life. While Teresa meticulously packed the children's belongings, he desperately tried to find a solution to his catastrophic financial situation. His bank accounts had been preventatively frozen due to the outstanding debts. His main credit card was blocked. The ATM denied him even the $100 he tried to withdraw from his personal account. In his wallet, he only had $300 in cash, all that remained of his former financial life. "Where are you going to sleep tonight?" Teresa asked him as she closed the last of the children's suitcases. "I don't know. Maybe some budget hotel, until I can reorganize myself." "David, look at me." Teresa stopped and confronted him directly. "Do you really think you can reorganize yourself after this? Your father is not someone who acts on impulse. This is calculated to be permanent." "He's my father, Teresa. He'll eventually have to forgive me, like you forgave him when he made mistakes." "Oh, wait. He never made mistakes with you. He was always perfect, generous, understanding. And this is how you repaid him." Teresa's words cut deeper than any external reproach because they contained an undeniable truth. Robert had been an exemplary father, and David had responded with ingratitude and contempt. At 6 in the evening, the moving truck Teresa had hired to transport their belongings to her parents' house arrived. The children supervised the removal of their toys and furniture with a silent sadness that broke his heart. "Is Daddy coming with us?" Emily asked, as her pink bicycle was loaded. "No, honey. Daddy has to sort out some problems first." "When is he going to sort them out?" Teresa looked at David with an expression that held years of accumulated disappointment. "We don't know, Emily." Jacob, more direct, like a typical teenager, confronted his father head-on. "Dad, are you going to be homeless because of what you did to Grandpa?" It's more complicated than that, son." "It doesn't seem complicated to me. You were mean to him, and now he's being mean to you. It's like in school. If you hit someone, you get punished. The brutal simplicity of Jacob's observation demonstrated that even a teenager understood the logic of cause and effect better than David had understood the consequences of his actions. At 7 in the evening, Teresa finished loading all of her and the children's belongings. The house, which a few hours earlier had been their family home, now looked like an empty shell with only the basic furniture that belonged to the property. "David, I need you to sign these papers." Teresa handed him a folder with legal documents she had prepared while he was out seeking impossible financial solutions. "What are they?" "Temporary separation of assets and provisional custody of the children. My lawyer prepared them this afternoon." David felt a dagger plunge into his stomach. "You already went to a lawyer?" "Of course. Did you think I was going to wait to see how far your fall would go? I have to protect the children." "Teresa, this is extreme. I just need time to—" "For what, David? To find another rich father you can betray? To secure another father-in-law whose favor you can gain by humiliating your family? That's not fair. You know what's not fair? That my children had to see their father behave like a savage toward their grandfather. You know what's not fair? That after 15 years of marriage, I discover my husband is capable of such cruelty." David signed the papers with trembling hands. He had no alternative. Without financial resources, without a job, without a house, he couldn't offer stability to anyone. "The children can visit you on weekends when you have an appropriate place to receive them," Teresa informed him as she put away the signed documents. "When? When you prove you're a trustworthy person again, if you ever manage to." At 8 in the evening, David found himself alone in an empty house that was no longer his, with $300 in cash and a suitcase with basic clothes. The rest of his belongings were in boxes in the company warehouse under Richard's custody. He walked out onto the street and wandered aimlessly through the Christmassy streets of New York. Families walked happily. Children ran with new toys. Couples hugged against the winter cold. Everyone seemed to have a home to return to, except him. He found a budget hotel near Grand Central Station where he could pay for a room for 3 nights, $200. He had $100 left for food and transportation. The room was small, with a single bed, a tiny bathroom, and a window overlooking a dark alley. He sat on the bed and contemplated the magnitude of his personal destruction. His phone rang. It was an unknown number. "David Miller?" "Yes. This is Marcus Allen, from the law firm, Allen and Associates. Your father has hired me to officially notify you that any attempt at direct or indirect contact with him will be considered harassment." "What?" "Mr. Miller has been very clear. He does not wish to receive calls, messages, visits, or intermediaries from you. Any violation of this instruction will result in a judicial restraining order." "He's my father, sir. Legally, Mr. Miller has the right to decide with whom he maintains a relationship. His decision is final." The call ended, leaving David with the final understanding that his father had not only punished him financially, but had completely severed any possibility of reconciliation. He looked at himself in the hotel bathroom mirror. The man, looking back at him, seemed to have aged 10 years in one day. Deep dark circles, an unkempt beard, wrinkled clothes. He looked exactly like what he was, someone who had lost everything due to his own stupidity. That night, as he tried to sleep in an unfamiliar bed, David reflected on the 24 hours that had completely changed his existence. Just 2 days ago, he was the CEO of a prosperous company. He lived in a luxury apartment, drove a sports car. He had a stable family and the respect of his community. Now, he was a man without a home, without a job, without a family, without resources, and without a foreseeable future, and all for a moment of arrogance that lasted less than 30 seconds. The words he had spoken resonated in his mind like a curse. "This seat is for my father-in-law. Get out." Now, he was the one who was out of everything. 3 days after the Christmas disaster, while David was trying to process his new reality in the tiny hotel room, he received an unexpected call that completely changed his perspective on the situation. "Dad?" It was Jacob's voice, shaky and full of emotion. "Son, how are you? How did you get my number?" "I called from Mom's phone." "Dad, I need to tell you something important. Grandpa came to see us." "Robert went to your maternal grandparents' house?" "Yes, yesterday afternoon. Mum wasn't there. She had gone shopping." Grandpa Arthur received him in the main living room as if he were a very important guest. "What happened?" "Dad, I've never seen Grandpa Robert so sad, but he also looked different, stronger, like when he makes important decisions at his company." David closed his eyes, imagining the scene, his father confronting the situation with the dignity that had always characterized him. "Go on, son." He asked Emily and me to sit down with him. He explained that what had happened with you had nothing to do with us, that he loved us exactly the same as always. What else did he say? He said that adults sometimes make decisions that have very serious consequences, but that we, the grandchildren, are not responsible for our parents' decisions. Robert's words demonstrated the kind of man he was. Even in the midst of his pain and disappointment, he was protecting the children from being dragged into the adult conflict. Emily asked him if he was mad at us, Jacob continued, and he told her he could never be mad at us because we hadn't done anything wrong. "How did your mother react when she got back?" "She got really nervous. I think she was afraid Grandpa Robert would blame her for what you did. But he was very polite to her. He told her he completely understood her decision to separate from you." David felt a new pang of pain. His father had not only cut him off, but he was validating the decisions of those who were abandoning him. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Jacob." "Why did you do it? Why were you so cruel to Grandpa?" His 15-year-old son's direct question forced him to confront a truth he had been avoiding. There was no valid excuse for his behavior. "Son, I thought I was doing something right. I thought showing respect to Grandpa Arthur was important. But Dad, showing respect to one person doesn't mean disrespecting another. I learned that when I was 8. The simple wisdom of his teenage son hit him like a revelation. An 8-year-old understood basic concepts of respect that he, at 42, had completely ignored. "You're right, Jacob. I made a terrible mistake. Can you fix it?" "I don't know, son. Your grandfather is very hurt. But you're hurt too, right? Mom says you lost your job and the house." "Yes, I lost a lot of things." "Did you lose them, or were they taken away as punishment?" Again, the brutal clarity of the teenage perspective. Jacob perfectly understood that David's consequences were not accidents of fate, but direct results of his actions. "They were taken away as punishment, son. Like when they take away my PlayStation when I misbehave. Exactly like that. And do you think you deserved it?" David remained silent for a long time. It was the first time anyone had asked him that question directly, and the first time he had asked it of himself. Honestly? Yes, Jacob, I think I deserved it. Then maybe Grandpa isn't being mean to you. Maybe he's being fair. His son's words cut deeper than all of Teresa's reproaches, all the financial humiliations, all the material losses. A teenager had articulated the fundamental truth that he had refused to accept. Robert was not being vindictive. He was being fair. Dad, are you still there? Yes, son, I'm here. Grandpa told us something else. He said we would have to choose if we wanted to maintain a relationship with him or with you, because he wasn't going to be in the same place as you ever again. What did you decide? We told him it wasn't fair to make us choose, that you were our dad and he was our grandpa, and that we loved both of you even if you had problems. How did he react? His eyes filled with tears. He hugged us very tightly and said we were very wise children. Then he proposed something. What? That we could see him on Wednesday afternoons and Sunday mornings, but we would never talk about you with him or about him with you, like separate compartments. David felt a mixture of relief and sadness. His father had found a way to maintain a relationship with his grandchildren without betraying his decision to cut ties with him. You accepted? Yes, but Dad, it's really weird. It's like having two different lives. I'm sorry, son. I'm so sorry for putting you in this situation. Are you going to try to fix things with him? I can't, Jacob. Your grandfather has made it very clear he wants nothing to do with me. You're not even going to try? How can I try if he won't even let me near him? I don't know, Dad. But Grandpa always says that difficult problems require creative solutions. After hanging up with Jacob, David sat on the hotel bed, processing the conversation. His children had managed to maintain a relationship with their grandfather, but at the cost of compartmentalizing their lives, and all because of his moment of arrogant stupidity. What struck him most was the emotional maturity the children had shown, contrasting dramatically with his own 42-year-old emotional immaturity. That afternoon, as he walked the streets of New York searching for job openings on his phone, David began to understand something fundamental. It wasn't just about recovering what he had lost. It was about becoming the kind of person who deserved to recover it. And that, he realized, might be the most difficult challenge of his life, because it was much easier to regain a job, a house, or a car than to regain the respect of a man you had completely betrayed, especially when that man was your own father and had every reason in the world not to give you a second chance. 2 weeks after the Christmas collapse, David had practically exhausted all his financial resources. The $100 he had left after paying for the hotel had evaporated on basic food and public transportation as he desperately searched for work throughout the city. His resume, which previously opened doors automatically due to his last name and family connections, was now systematically rejected. The construction industry in New York was a closed circle where everyone knew everyone, and the news of his confrontation with Robert Miller had spread like wildfire. "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller, but we don't have any openings at the moment," they repeated in every office with polite smiles that hid the true message. No one wanted to hire the son who had betrayed Robert Miller. On the 4th day of January, when he didn't even have money left for a hostel room, David was forced to swallow his pride in a way he had never imagined. He applied for a job at an industrial cleaning company operating on the outskirts of Manhattan. "Previous cleaning experience?" asked Remedy Sanchez, the 45-year-old supervisor conducting the interview. "No, but I learn fast, and I urgently need to work. Why does someone with your professional profile want to work here? As I see it, you were a CEO." David had prepared an answer that contained part of the truth. I had irreconcilable differences with my former business partner. I need to start from scratch. Remedy studied him with shrewd eyes. She was a hard-working woman who had built her small company from scratch and recognized both desperation and genuine humility when she saw it. The work is hard. The hours are long. The pay is $1,000 a month, night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Are you sure you can handle it? Completely sure. Start tomorrow. Don't be late a single day, because there are 50 people waiting for this position. That night, David worked cleaning corporate offices until dawn. His hands, accustomed to signing multi-million-dollar contracts, now handled mops and chemical cleaning products. His designer suits were replaced by blue uniforms with the Remedy Cleaning Solutions logo. During those first weeks of night work, David experienced an unexpected psychological transformation. The forced humility of cleaning bathrooms and emptying trash cans obliged him to reflect on concepts he had taken for granted his entire life: dignity, honest work, the value of effort. His co-workers were immigrants, single mothers, college students financing their studies, retirees supplementing insufficient pensions. None of them knew his previous history, and for the first time in years, David was not judged by his last name or family connections, but by his willingness to work. "Where are you from, David?" asked Miguel, an Ecuadorian co-worker, during the midnight break. "From here, New York." "And what did you do before this?" "I worked in construction, administrative stuff." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. David had developed the skill of navigating conversations without fully revealing his past. Meanwhile, through controlled encounters with his children, David indirectly learned about his father's new reality. Jacob and Emily casually mentioned, during their weekly phone calls, details about their grandfather that painted a picture of business transformation. "Grandpa Robert has a new partner," Emily commented during one of their phone conversations. "A new partner?" "Yes, Grandpa Arthur. Now they're working together on big projects. Mum says they're going to build really tall buildings." The irony was devastating. His father-in-law, the same man he had tried to impress by humiliating his father, now was Robert's business partner. The alliance David had attempted to force had materialized, but completely excluding him. "Do they see each other often?" he asked, trying to maintain a casual tone. "Almost every day. Sometimes they come together to pick us up from school. They laugh a lot when they talk about their projects." David hung up that call, feeling lonelier than ever. He had not only lost his father, but he had inadvertently catalyzed a friendship and business partnership between Robert and Arthur that likely never would have existed without his destructive intervention. 1 month after starting the cleaning job, David had developed a routine that provided him with basic, albeit precarious, stability. He shared a room in a student apartment in the Lower East Side, where he paid $400 a month in rent. His expenses were limited to basic food, public transportation, and phone calls to his children. The physical transformation was evident. He had lost weight due to the combination of intense physical labor and austere diet. His clothes were simple, practical, economical. His hands, once soft from office work, were now calloused from handling cleaning tools, but the psychological transformation was deeper. The experience of losing everything had forced him to re-evaluate what truly constituted value and personal dignity. For the first time in his adult life, David was surviving exclusively through his own effort, without family safety nets or privileged connections. One night, while cleaning the offices of the MetLife building, he stopped in front of a window that offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. The city stretched out before him, illuminated and prosperous, full of opportunities and dreams. He remembered the times he had observed similar views from his former executive office when he believed his success was the result of his talent and personal merit. Now he understood it had been the result of inherited privileges and gifted opportunities. The difference was that now every dollar he earned represented real sweat, genuine effort, learned humility. For the first time since Christmas night, David began to feel something akin to hope. Not hope of recovering his old life, but hope of building something new and authentic from the foundation. Something that could even make a man like Robert Miller proud, even if that man was no longer able to see it. March had arrived in New York with the promise of spring, and David had already been working at the cleaning company for 3 months. His life had developed a simple but dignified routine, working at night, sleeping in the mornings, seeking professional growth opportunities in the afternoons, and maintaining regular contact with his children through carefully scheduled phone calls. It was during one of those job-seeking afternoons that something happened that would completely change his perspective on the family situation. David had left a failed interview at a minor renovation company when he decided to walk through Central Park to clear his mind before returning to his shared room. The fresh air and the first green shoots on the trees provided him with a moment of peace amidst his difficult circumstances. As he walked along the mall, he saw a scene that completely paralyzed him. On a nearby bench by the pond, Robert and Arthur were sitting, conversing animatedly, surrounded by architectural blueprints spread out on a folding table. Both men looked relaxed, smiling, clearly enjoying their professional collaboration. What impacted David most was not seeing them together, but observing the visible transformation in his father. Robert looked rejuvenated, energetic, with a vitality David couldn't remember seeing in years. His gestures were animated as he pointed out details on the plans. His eyes shone with genuine enthusiasm. From his hiding place behind a group of tourists, David overheard fragments of the conversation. "The main structure can support 2 additional floors. No problem," Robert was saying while tracing lines on the blueprints with a red pencil. "Brilliant, Robert. Your experience in deep foundations is exactly what we needed for this project. Arthur, working with you has been one of the best decisions of my career. We should have done this years ago." "I completely agree. You know what? I think this partnership is going to be much more successful than either of us imagined." David felt a simultaneous pang of pain and acknowledgement. His father had found not only a business partner, but apparently a genuine friend in Arthur. The camaraderie between the 2 men was evident and natural. The most painful part for David was realizing that his father looked happier and more fulfilled than he had been in years. The loss of his son had not destroyed him. It had liberated him to form more authentic and satisfying relationships. "How are the grandchildren doing?" Arthur asked as he rolled up one of the blueprints. "Jacob and Emily are extraordinary, intelligent, resilient, mature for their age. They've handled this whole family situation with a wisdom that astounds me. That's the result of the education you gave them all these years, Robert." "I hope so. They're not to blame for their father's decisions." David felt tears sting his eyes. His father was still protecting and loving his grandchildren, even while maintaining his firm position regarding him. "Do you never feel tempted to reconcile with David?" Arthur asked, with genuine curiosity. Robert remained silent for a long time, contemplating the calm waters of the pond. "Arthur, for 42 years, I thought I knew my son. I thought I had raised a man with values, principles, respect for family. On Christmas night, I discovered I was completely wrong. People can change, Robert. They can, but real change requires real consequences. If I forgive him easily, what does he learn? What lesson do my grandchildren receive about acceptable behavior? It's not about punishing him forever. It's about him understanding the value of what he destroyed. Perhaps one day he'll show that he's truly learned, but that day hasn't arrived yet. David walked away from the park without being detected, but his father's words resonated in his mind for days. Robert was not being inflexible out of cruelty, but out of deep educational principles. That night, while cleaning offices in the financial district, David reflected on the conversation he had overheard. His father was waiting for evidence of genuine growth, not simply desperate apologies or emotional pleas. The question he asked himself was, had I truly grown, or was I just surviving until I could regain my former status? Over the next few weeks, David began to honestly evaluate his transformation process. Was he learning authentic humility, or was he just patiently waiting for the storm to pass? The answer made him uncomfortable. Part of him was still secretly hoping that his father would eventually relent and forgive him, allowing him to return to some version of his old life. But the conversation in the park had demonstrated something crucial. Robert had moved on. He wasn't waiting for David to return. He had built a new, prosperous, and satisfying reality without him. If David wanted any kind of future reconciliation, he would have to demonstrate genuine transformation, not simply suffer temporary consequences. And that, he realized, would require much more time, effort, and personal growth than he had imagined. The real question was no longer when his father would forgive him, but when he would become someone worthy of forgiveness. That realization marked the beginning of a completely different phase in his personal recovery process. December had returned to New York with its characteristic cold and Christmas lights, marking exactly 1 year since the night that had destroyed David's life. As he walked through the illuminated streets, after finishing his night shift cleaning, he stopped in front of store windows, decorated with happy family scenes that painfully reminded him of what he had lost. His transformation during these 12 months had been radical. He was no longer the arrogant, privileged man who had shoved his father to the floor. The physical labor, the economic difficulties, and the forced solitude had sculpted a completely different version of himself. His calloused hands, his simple clothes, and his face weathered by nights of effort told the story of a humility learned through suffering. Remedy, his supervisor at the cleaning company, had noticed his evolution and offered him additional responsibilities. David, I want you to coordinate the night team for the new contract at the Time Warner Center, she had announced the previous week. Your work has been impeccable all year, and the clients specifically asked for you to be assigned to their facilities. The salary increase to $1,800 a month had allowed him to move into a small but self-contained apartment in Queens. It wasn't luxury, but it was dignity. He had bought second-hand furniture, modestly decorated the walls with photographs of his children, and created a humble but authentic home. His weekly calls with Jacob and Emily had become the brightest point of his existence. The children had grown over the year, and their conversations reflected an emotional maturity that constantly astonished him. "Dad, are you really okay?" Emily had asked him during their last phone conversation. "Your voice sounds different. Calmer?" "Calmer? Yes. Before, you always sounded like you were running somewhere important. Now, you sound like you're exactly where you want to be. His 13-year-old daughter's observation had impacted him deeply. She was right. For the first time in decades, David wasn't constantly chasing the next achievement, the next promotion, the next material acquisition. You know what, sweetie? I think you're right. Are you going to try talking to Grandpa Robert someday? I don't know, Emily. That decision doesn't just depend on me. But would you like to? David had reflected carefully before answering. I would like him to see that I've changed, but not to get back what I lost, but so he would know that his son finally learned the lessons he tried to teach me my whole life. On Christmas Eve, David worked his usual shift in the corporate offices of the financial center while cleaning the executive floor of one of New York's most prestigious skyscrapers. He stopped in front of windows that offered a panoramic view of the city illuminated for the holidays. A year ago, he had been dining in a luxury home, surrounded by family, with every material comfort imaginable, and he had been profoundly unhappy without knowing it, empty of authentic purpose, dependent on external validation to feel self-worth. Now, he was alone in an empty office at 3 in the morning, working for a modest salary, living in a small apartment, but he experienced an inner peace he had never known during his years of privilege. His phone vibrated with a text message from Jacob. Dad, Grandpa Robert asked about you today. David felt his heart accelerate. It was the first time in 12 months he had received any indication that his father had mentioned his existence. He replied immediately. What did he ask? He asked if we knew how you were, if you had a job, if you had a place to live. Emily and I told him you seemed to be doing well, but that we didn't know the details because you didn't want to worry us. How did he react? He was silent for a long time. Then he said, I hope he's learning what he needs to learn. David read the message 3 times. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't an invitation to return, but it wasn't total indifference either. It was cautious hope. That night, after finishing his work, David walked to St. Patrick's Cathedral, which remained open for late-night Christmas services. He hadn't been particularly religious during his previous life, but the solitude and reflection of the past year had brought him closer to spirituality. He sat on one of the back pews and contemplated the illuminated altar. For the first time since that fateful Christmas night, David felt he had something genuine to be thankful for. He hadn't recovered his fortune, his social status, his marriage, or his family relationship, but he had found something he hadn't known he'd lost: authentic self-respect. The man who had shoved his father to the floor had been rich in material goods, but poor in character. The man who now cleaned offices at night had lost possessions, but gained personal dignity. As he left the cathedral at dawn, David made a decision he had been considering for weeks. He wouldn't try to contact his father directly, respecting the legal boundaries set, but he would write a letter. Not a letter asking for forgiveness or begging for reconciliation, but a letter of gratitude, thanking him for the lessons learned, acknowledging the fairness of the consequences received, and reporting on the personal growth achieved. A letter Robert could read or ignore, but one David needed to write to complete his process of inner transformation, because he had learned that true maturity was not about getting what you want, but about becoming who you need to be. And for the first time in his adult life, David was proud of who he was becoming. The letter David wrote during the early hours of Christmas Day became the most important document of his life. It wasn't drafted impulsively, but after days of careful reflection, multiple drafts, and a brutal honesty with himself he had never experienced. He sat at the small table in his apartment in Queens, surrounded by the Christmas silence of a working-class neighborhood with a cup of cheap coffee and simple paper bought at the corner store. "Dear Robert," he finally wrote, "I know I don't have the right to address you, and I completely respect your decision not to want contact with me. This letter is not seeking a response or reconciliation. I simply need to tell you some things I've learned during this year that changed my life forever." David wrote for 4 hours, detailing not his suffering or losses, but his process of inner growth. He described his night work not as humiliation, but as an education in labor dignity. He explained his modest apartment not as punishment, but as a learning experience in self-sufficiency. "For 42 years, I thought I deserved everything I had for being your son. Now I understand I deserved nothing simply for being born with privileges. Respect is earned with actions, not last names. Dignity is built with character, not bank accounts." He described how he had observed his business partnership with Arthur from a distance, and how he had understood that his father had found the authentic collaboration that he had never known how to offer. "Seeing you work with Arthur taught me something fundamental. You didn't need a CEO's son. You needed a partner who respected you. And I was ever capable of being that because I was too busy feeling entitled to everything without having truly contributed anything." The hardest part to write was the complete acknowledgement of his behavior that Christmas night. "There is no excuse for what I did. Shoving you to the floor in front of your grandchildren was the most cowardly and cruel act of my life. It wasn't a mistake. It was a conscious choice to prioritize my social image over your dignity. It was pure betrayal, and I deserved exactly the consequences I received." David wrote about his children, about how he had learned to value their weekly phone calls more than any previous professional achievement. "Jacob and Emily have taught me more about emotional maturity in these 12 months than I taught them in their entire childhood. Their ability to maintain love for both of us, despite my destructive behavior, demonstrates the education you gave them for years when I was too busy with my own ego to appreciate it." Towards the end of the letter, David addressed the future without pleas or expectations. "I am not writing to you expecting forgiveness. The forgiveness is something that must be earned through years of consistent behavior, not pretty words on paper. Nor am I writing hoping you will change your decision about our relationship. I completely respect your choice and understand that it is fair and necessary. I am writing so you know that your son is finally learning to be a real man." At 43 years old, for the first time in my life, I am proud of who I am, not what I have. I work honestly, live modestly, love my children authentically, and deeply respect the people around me. The conclusion of the letter was the part that took him the longest to perfect. "If we never speak again, I want you to know that I became a better person thanks to the consequences you imposed. Not despite them, but because of them. That is a more valuable gift than any material inheritance. You gave me the opportunity to discover my own worth, separate from your achievements and your generosity. Thank you for being the father I never knew I needed, strong enough to let me fall when necessary, wise enough to protect my children from my mistakes, and fair enough to treat me exactly as I deserved to be treated. With deep respect and eternal love, your son who is finally growing up, David." He sealed the letter in a simple envelope and wrote the address of the family home where he had grown up. He didn't mail it immediately, but kept it for a week, rereading it every night to ensure that every word genuinely reflected his feelings. On January 2nd, he walked to the post office and sent the letter certified mail. 3 weeks later, he received a response consisting of a single sheet of paper with his father's familiar handwriting. "David, I received your letter and read it several times. I'm glad to know that you are well and that you are growing as a person. That growth is exactly what I hoped would occur. I am not ready to resume a personal relationship, and perhaps I never will be. But I want you to know that I am proud of the man you are choosing to be. Keep on that path." Robert David treasured that response as his most valuable possession. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was recognition. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was respect. And for the first time since that terrible Christmas night, David felt complete peace. He had learned that some relationships cannot be repaired, but personal growth is always possible. He had discovered that the most important approval is one's own, and that authentic dignity comes from living by solid principles, not from material possessions. His father had taught him the most valuable lesson of his life by refusing to rescue him from the consequences of his actions. And David had finally learned to be grateful for it. If you liked this story, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box to the left. Thanks for watching.